The wind was cold that afternoon, the kind that bites through thin sweaters and reminds you that autumn isn't always kind. In the middle of the park, a little girl sat on a wooden bench beside her mother, clutching a threadbare blanket around her shoulders. Her cheeks were pink from the chill, and her small voice trembled as she whispered something that pierced the quiet air like a broken note. "Are we bad people, Mama?" The woman beside her looked down, eyes full of tears she tried to hide. Before she could answer, a man sitting a few benches away, holding a sandwich wrapped in brown paper, heard those words, and his world suddenly stopped moving. If you believe kindness still has the power to change lives, to heal broken hearts, and to rewrite the stories of people who've been forgotten, then please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to our channel. Because today's story will remind you, goodness still lives among us. Ethan Cole had come to the park simply to eat his lunch in peace. A single father, he'd been juggling 2 jobs since his wife Claire passed away 2 years ago. His life revolved around his 7-year-old son Noah, and the little moments they managed to share between school, work, and exhaustion. But as he watched the mother and daughter on the bench a few yards away, he felt something stir deep inside him. Something that reminded him of his own struggles, those nights when Noah had asked him if everything would be okay, and Ethan hadn't known what to say. The woman, maybe in her late 20s, looked tired. Her sweater had small holes near the sleeves, her hair was tied up loosely, and her face carried the quiet pain of someone trying to stay strong for far too long. The girl, no older than 6, had innocent blue eyes that still held hope, even though life hadn't given her much reason to. Ethan didn't want to intrude, but he couldn't look away either. When the little girl asked that question again, this time louder, his chest tightened. "Are we bad people, Mama?" "Because nobody wants us anywhere." The mother's lips trembled as she pulled her daughter close. "No, sweetheart," she said softly. "We're just unlucky right now." She tried to smile, but her voice cracked at the edges. Ethan's grip on his sandwich loosened. He had heard many cries before. His own heart had wept for his wife countless nights. But something about that small, trembling voice broke him in a way he couldn't explain. He stood up and slowly walked toward them, uncertain of what he could even say. The mother looked startled when he approached, as if bracing for judgment. But Ethan's eyes carried nothing but concern. "Hi," he said gently, his voice careful. "I couldn't help overhearing. Is everything all right?" The woman hesitated, then nodded too quickly. "We're fine," she said, "just resting for a while." But her eyes betrayed her words. They were tired, scared, and wet with tears she couldn't stop. Ethan saw the worn-out backpack beside her feet, the half-eaten piece of bread in her daughter's hand, and realized that resting wasn't the truth. He sat down on the edge of the bench, keeping his distance. "I'm Ethan," he said quietly. "And that's a nice blanket you've got there," he added, smiling at the little girl. The child, shy but curious, looked at him and whispered, "It used to be my baby blanket. Mama says it's magic. It keeps me safe." Ethan nodded. "Then it's the best kind of magic." The mother's name, he learned, was Grace. She had lost her job 3 months ago when the diner she worked at shut down. Her landlord gave her 2 weeks to vacate, and with no family nearby, she'd been living in her car ever since. But last night, the car broke down completely. Now she and her daughter, Lily, had nowhere left to go. "I've been trying to find something, anything," Grace said softly, her voice trembling. "I just need one chance." Ethan felt his throat tighten. He thought of Noah, of how it could have easily been them if life had twisted another way. Without saying a word, he reached into his bag and offered them his sandwich. Grace shook her head. "We can't take that." "Yes, you can," Ethan said gently. "It's just a sandwich. I can get another one." Lily's eyes lit up when her mother finally accepted it. She took a small bite, and the way she smiled, it was as if she'd been given the world. Ethan sat silently for a while, watching them eat. The park was full of laughter from other families, but for Grace and Lily, it felt like the world had forgotten them. That evening, when Ethan went home, Noah greeted him with his usual excitement. But Ethan's heart was somewhere else. He kept thinking about that little girl and her mother, wondering where they would sleep that night. After Noah went to bed, Ethan sat by the window, staring at the quiet street outside. He remembered how people had helped him after Claire's death. Neighbors who brought meals, co-workers who covered shifts. Back then, he had promised himself that someday he would pay that kindness forward. Maybe this was his moment. The next morning, Ethan returned to the park with a thermos of hot cocoa and some breakfast sandwiches. Grace and Lily were there, sitting under the same tree. Their faces lit up when they saw him. He sat with them, shared breakfast, and listened as Grace told him about her life. How she had grown up in a small town, dreamed of becoming a teacher, but life kept knocking her down. "I just want to make sure Lily never feels unloved," she said quietly. "Even if I can't give her much." Ethan looked at her and saw the same resilience that had kept him alive after losing Claire. He couldn't let them slip through the cracks. That day, he called a friend who managed a small cafe nearby and asked if they needed help. Miraculously, there was an opening for a part-time waitress. Grace hesitated when he told her, but he smiled. "You said you just needed one chance, right?" "Take it." When she walked into that cafe the next day, she looked nervous, clutching Lily's hand tightly. But by the end of her first shift, she was smiling again for the first time in months. Ethan picked up Lily from the park and watched her draw pictures while waiting for her mom to finish. Slowly, what began as an act of kindness turned into something deeper, an unspoken connection between two broken souls trying to heal. Weeks passed, and life began to change. Grace found a small apartment with the money she earned, and Ethan helped her move in. Lily and Noah became inseparable. They played in the same park where they had first met. One evening, as the sun set and the sky turned gold, Ethan found himself sitting on that same bench again, watching Grace laugh with Lily. It was a sound so pure, so filled with life, that it brought tears to his eyes. But what truly stayed with him was the moment Lily looked up at him with her innocent eyes and said, "Mr. Ethan, Mama says you're our angel." He smiled and said, "Maybe we're all just angels for someone else, Lily." That night, Grace stood by the door as Ethan got ready to leave. "You didn't have to help us," she said softly. "But you did." "Why?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Because once someone helped me when I thought I had nothing left," he said. "And because your little girl reminded me what real strength looks like." Tears filled her eyes. She stepped forward and hugged him tightly. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was something more sacred. It was gratitude, humanity, and hope all woven together. Months later, Christmas lights glimmered across town. The cafe was busier than ever, and Grace had become one of the most beloved workers there. Ethan and Noah came by often, bringing small gifts for Lily. On Christmas Eve, as snow began to fall, Ethan invited them to spend the evening with his family. That night, laughter echoed through his home again, and for the first time in years, it felt whole. After dinner, while the children played by the tree, Grace sat beside Ethan on the couch. "You changed our lives," she said. "You didn't even know us, but you gave us a reason to believe again." Ethan shook his head. "You did that yourself," he said gently. "All I did was listen." Outside, snow covered the streets in a soft white blanket. The world seemed quiet and forgiving, as if every broken heart had found a place to rest. Grace looked at him and whispered, "You know what Lily asked me today?" She said, "Mama, do you think we're bad people?" I told her, no, baby. We're just people who got lucky enough to meet someone good. Ethan smiled through tears. Then maybe, he said softly, we were all meant to find each other. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to believe in kindness again, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us of the beauty in humanity. Before you go, we'd love to know, have you ever helped someone who changed your life in return? Share your story in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the smallest act of kindness can heal the deepest wounds.